You know, it's kind of hard to come up with a cold open when I just got done walking the dogs in -1 degree weather. I don't know where I was going with that, so let's just take a look at Waterman Intense Black. So yeah, not every cold open can be a winner, and like I said, it's really cold out, so I'm surprised I even remembered to write one at all. All that aside though, I decided for 2022 that I wanted to finish out the Waterman collection and take a look at the last 3 inks. So, this week we're taking a look at Waterman Intense Black. I will give Waterman one thing: every time I come back to these bottles, I find myself liking them quite a bit more than other brands. Well, except for maybe the Kaweco bottle refresh. Those just stack better. But I don't think that Waterman was really going for stackability with these. They were going for an economical desk piece that has utility that you just don't find in other bottles. Just this little ability to rock the bottle on its side to get a better fill as the ink level goes down is something so simple that I really wish other brands would do. Or at the very least, incorporate one of those stupid filling reservoirs like the bottle of Pilot Blue that I have. You know, I feel a rant coming on, so before we do that, or before I rant, I just want to say I've saved the toughest of these 3 inks for last because, well, black, red, and brown are just 3 areas where I just don't feel like I've found a true favorite. So let's see if all that changes today with Waterman Intense Black. First up is the ink blot. It may not show it now, but as I was prepping this blot, I was expecting more reddish hues in the gray areas, as that was the profile showing through during the dry time. Once dry though, I like the subtle blue undertones in the lighter gray portions. The red though does make an appearance as the blot fades from the transitions into the sheening territory in the center. Speaking of those transition tones though, I'm finding myself preferring the Kaweco tones better. As for dynamics though, this ink is giving us much more dynamic range from the lighter tones into the sheen. So intense may not be coming through on the blot, but intense black sounds better than dynamic black, I guess? Moving on to the dry time, I really want to call this ink Waterman Consistent Black. Normally we see Rhodia far outperform Tomoe on dry time, but as you can see, we're looking at right around 20 seconds on both papers. Depending on the rest of the key performance indicators, that very well may help this ink earn a regular rotation in my gray-black category. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the test that tends to sink a few inks that show initial potential. Right off the bat, color lift is looking pretty bad here. Normally that doesn't bode well, but I've found myself pleasantly surprised when it comes to these budget inks, and Waterman Intense Black is no different here. Once we get the water off the page, I'm floored. This is an amazing result with a very bold underlayer showing through the ghosting from the color lift. So pair this water result with those dry times, and this one is starting to make its way onto the keeper shelf. Before we get there though, let's take a look at how this ink performs on paper. This time around, I'm starting with Rhodia, and I will say this ink is a little temperamental. What I mean here is that for an ink that takes 20 seconds to dry, I find it a little sluggish on initial flow. Once it gets going, the consistency is there, but this ink likes to start a bit dry unless you prime the feed a little at the onset. Side note, no priming was done before this sample, so what you see is what I was getting from a fresh start each time with this ink. With sluggish flow does come an interesting dichotomy. On one hand, we're given a more dynamic writing experience, but on the other hand, this ink can potentially hard start. On this particular writing sample, it's trying to prove me a liar, but that's just the nature of this ink. It's consistently inconsistent. Which, by the way, half a dozen times over the last 2 weeks, I have had a hard start or two. On a positive note though, it doesn't look like we are losing any line width here on Rhodia, so that is definitely a positive showing. And yes, overall, once this ink gets going from a nib like this one, it comes off as intense, so I'll give it a win on Rhodia from that regard. Now on Tomoe, I was expecting a bit more of the same, but for the problems I had with this ink on Rhodia over the last 2 weeks, I didn't have those pop up nearly as often, or at all, as they did over on Rhodia. There have been 2 hard starts while journaling with this ink and prepping for this video, but on TR, those only occurred after extended cap off times. With how much I control hand oil and other outside factors when testing and prepping for ink reviews, I'm still trying to narrow down why this behavior was more prevalent on Rhodia than TR. That said though, for me, TR is my daily driver, so I can forgive the hiccups that happened on my paper of choice, as they were a direct result of the cap off test. Rhodia though, not so much. And if that is your paper of choice, then that is something to be considered if you're looking to add this ink into your collection. But circling back to the most important detail, on TR, does this ink live up to the Intense name? Yeah, it does. And does it have a spot on the Shelf of Dreams? Well, since I'm a TR guy, yeah, it really does in that respect too. But if I find that perfect all-arounder, this ink may have a fight on its hands. And that's going to do it for my look at Waterman Intense Black. If you like the video or find it useful, then hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you have an extra $1 or $2 lying around each month and want to help support the channel and get some extras like these videos early, then click on that Patreon link down below. Till next time, don't drink the ink.